Hello, and thank you for joining us for our next video in our series of conversations with female sales leaders for Women's History Month. Today, I am so excited to be joined by Kelly Breslin Wright. She is on the board of directors for tech companies like Fastly, Lucid, and Parity at Even. She's on the faculty of University of Washington, where she actually teaches a course that she designed in go-to-market strategy. Previous to this current phase of her life, she actually was the 10th employee at Tableau, was there for 12 years, but she was key in scaling the company up all the way through their IPO and up to $850 million in revenue. And when she left, she was the executive vice president of sales there. So with that, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's great to be here.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So let's start out the same way we always do. How did you get into sales?
Sales. Well, I feel like that was pretty much always my calling. From the time I was really young, I was the one that was always selling the candy bars and the cookies. In high school, I sold shoes. And then when I went to college, I actually did this crazy job with a company called the Southwestern Company, where I ran my own business for 4 summers in college selling educational books door to door. And that is when I really got hooked.
I'm curious, what is it about selling educational books door to door that got you so hooked on sales? Because that's something, door to door sales especially has very much a stigma of being absolutely brutal. So how did, in that kind of reputationally one of the hardest sales jobs, what got you hooked?
Well, that's a great question, Ashley. And it is a crazy job. People in college thought I was just insane to do this weird job where I was selling educational books door to door. And to paint the picture, it was from when I was 18 till 22. I was spending my summers carrying a 25-pound book bag, going door to door, selling educational books to help families and their kids with school. And if you can imagine the time, it was crazy because sometimes it would be very, very hot. Sometimes it would be pouring rain. But regardless, when you go knock on a door, it's not always the most welcome person that someone answering the door sees during the day. So tons of people slamming doors in my face and dogs chasing me and nipping at my heels and police stopping me, trying to figure out why I was there, potentially illegally soliciting in the neighborhood. But the thing is that over the course of those 4 summers, I talked to 12,000 different families in their houses and was really having a positive impact of getting kids and their families really excited about school and education. And I was running my own business, hearing everyone's interesting stories, and I heard everything. I mean, anything that happens in a house, I have seen it and I have heard it. And the thing that was just most compelling about me is being able to hear these families and these children's unique stories, being able to understand what their needs and problems were, and being able to figure out a way to really help them. And it got me really hooked on being able to help people solve their problems and having a positive impact and being able to really control my own destiny, because it was all about however many people I ended up seeing, how I controlled my attitude, how I was able to make sure I showed up in the best way at each person's house. And it really just showed how being in sales is a great way to be able to connect with others and help them in their own unique situation.
No, and that's so true. And it's something I feel like is becoming more and more common. People are talking about is the importance and the joy of those connections. It's really powerful stuff. So as you look back on your career and kind of your growth, and especially your time at Tableau and teaching and everything else, what are some key lessons that you learned along the way?
Well, a lot of those lessons started actually from the time I was selling books door to door, and then they go through all the way through my entire career. But if I think back to those really character building moments when I was in my summers in college selling books door to door, the first we talked about, people slam doors on in your face, and that can be really demoralizing. And so first is to learn how to control what you can control. Because I could control how I showed up at that person's house. I couldn't control what the person answering the door was going to do or say. So I think really, really important, control what you can control. 2 is have a positive attitude. And how are you controlling what you're thinking about and your own personal self-talk? Because in sales, in everything in life, but especially in sales, there's a lot of adversity. There's a lot of no's. So we have to keep ourselves positive. Related to that is learning how to deal with adversity and picking yourself up from failures. How can we be able to learn from each of those failures so that we can get better the next time? I think next is having a growth mindset. I think anyone that is going to be in sales or in any kind of career, it's how do you take those lessons learned today and be able to really build on it and learn from it to continue to go forward. And the last, which we touched on already, I mean, there's many more lessons. These are the first ones that maybe come to mind, is just really trying to understand other people's stories. And it's about that emotional connection. And whether you're in sales or in management or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or whatever it is, it's really about being able to forge those meaningful human connections. And sales teaches so much about that because we have an opportunity to connect with so many people in and out every day.
No, it's one of my favorite things that we do and get to have incredible conversations like this, which makes me feel I'm very lucky here. But kind of switching gears slightly, have there been any points in your career where you felt like you were misunderstood? And how did you handle those?
Misunderstood. Well, I feel like that every day. I mean, that happens to all of us. So that is not a unique thing. It happened through my entire career, and I still face it all of the time. And there's so many examples that I could fall back to. I'm trying to think about one that might be more relevant. Well, here's a story. I'm the type of leader or the type of salesperson that people say, I talk fast, I talk a lot, I have a strong personality. Sometimes I can be forceful. People talk about that as being aggressive or bossy. I mean, we've all had that, especially women in sales. Sometimes can be understood in terms of what our intent is. But I'm also the type of person that I really value these emotional connections. So I care about when people's birthdays are and when their anniversaries are and what is happening with people and their kids and their families. But the interesting part is every single performance review that I've had in my entire career, back from when I was an individual salesperson to running revenue and field operations for a public company, and even now in the board work that I'm doing, oftentimes the performance review is, hey, Kelly, you need to be more human. Can you just figure out how to be more human? And I always thought it's such a bizarre piece of feedback, because I'm the one that when I'm giving recognition to people on the sales team, I'm the one that tears up. When people tell me something happening with their customers, I'm the one that gets emotional. And I find that, especially in a world where I have always been one of the only, if not the only woman in the room, of a woman executive, a woman in technology, a woman sales executive in technology, there weren't tons of other people around who were modeling this whole level of being human. And I think it's an interesting thing to take away, because I wonder how many men have ever had that as one of the key parts of their performance review. Can you please be more human? So I think that there is a bit of a difference, and a lot of it is just about really seeking to understand what the other person's intent is and learning to just bring your authentic self to work. People are going to misunderstand us all of the time, and that doesn't mean that we need to try to navigate and change who we are. It's important to just be our own true, authentic self. And sometimes we are going to be misunderstood. It's just the fact of the world.
No, I think that's true. I think that's a really good advice, and I feel like everyone's heard some variant of that. Be more human at some point. That's a fun one, and that's really a really good point to try and figure out. Okay, what's driving this? Is there a specific situation? Is there a specific behavior? Let's try and get it specific. So, Kelly, you talk a lot about, or you've mentioned already, being the only woman in the room on the board in tech, doing all these sort of things. And while I think there's no argument that it's getting a lot better out there. There are obviously a lot of women, people of color, members of the LGBTQ plus community. Do you have any specific advice or tips you might give to them if they feel like they're being limited by their current position or like they're being held back, hitting a glass ceiling, something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ashley. I chose a career where I am a woman in sales in technology. And as I mentioned, that is very, very common that I would be the only woman in the room. I'd be the only woman in sales, the woman in technology. When you put them all together, certainly the only executive female in technology that was in the room a lot of the time. And so a few tips that I put out there. First, we talked about one of the lessons learned early on was to control what you can control. So I couldn't control who else was in the room, but I could control what I did and how I showed up. And so I would work really hard. Oftentimes I was the hardest working person in the room. I would work more hours. I couldn't control how people thought or perceived me, but I can control how I showed up. I could control my own attitude. I could make sure that I was always treating people with what I thought was fairness and respect. So people might not always like me or like my decisions, but they would know, or I would aspire so people would know that I was operating with the right intent, trying to do the right things, and treating people with fairness and respect. Still, at the same time, though, sometimes you'd feel like you're hitting a glass ceiling or you weren't understood, as I mentioned before. And in those situations, I think some people, whether we're talking about women or men or people of other different diverse groups, feel like they've hit a glass ceiling and they're stuck. So one piece of advice that I give to people is, if you feel stuck, then it's important for us to remember that we are the drivers of our own career. So who is in charge of your career? You are. It's not someone else. So when we're feeling stuck, we need to figure out what we can do to try to navigate out of that, to try to do that through discussions, to try to do that with work, to try to do that with navigating around it. If we really, truly are stuck, and there's no way around, then we're still in control, because we can say, should we stay in this situation? Should we stay with this manager on this team in this company? And if we're truly stuck, then it is our responsibility and our obligation and within our control to get unstuck and get us into another situation where we can continue to progress and drive our career forward. So I think it's just remembering we're in control.
No, that's so true. So shifting gears slightly, what advice would you have for someone who's considering a career in sales?
In sales, people seem to have this perception of what a good salesperson is. And oftentimes they're thinking it is this strong extrovert with a really strong personality, who's a great negotiator, who talks really fast. And I mean, for me, I am a fast talker. I put a lot of words in. I'm extroverted. But I've seen salespeople of all different stripes, and salespeople come in very different packages. But the thing is that there are some common trends to people who are good salespeople. And those common trends are people who are great at sales. They tend to be really passionate. They tend to be great workers, hard workers. They are people that have a growth mindset. They tend to be people that have a lot of initiative, and they like to drive. They're somewhat competitive. They're people that really like to hear other people's stories. They're fantastic communicators and storytellers so that they can show that empathy and be able to really emotionally connect with others. So I think the important part about sales is if someone is thinking about a career in sales, do they actually care about other people? Do they care about hearing those other people's stories? Do they like helping others to solve problems? Are they, by virtue, are they an empathetic person that wants to connect and spend their time with other people? Are they ones that actually want to have a positive impact, to be able to move their customer and others forward on their own journey? And if that's what you want to do, is to have a positive impact by being able to help others in hearing their unique stories and solving their unique problems, regardless of what your personality is or how you communicate, you could be very, very effective in sales.
I could not agree more. All right, so our last question today, and there's been a lot of good stuff in here. What do you think that we can do to support all the women in sales so we can continue to grow, evolve, and achieve great things together?
Well, actually, I think the most important thing is that we need to support each other. We need to be able to find a network of like-minded women who are propping each other up and supporting. And one of the biggest challenges that we have, whether it is women in sales or now that I see for women in board work, also people that come from all these other diversity groups, is the challenge is people tend to hire and promote and mentor those people that look and act and sound like they do. It's just natural. It's this unconscious bias. And so it's all of our responsibilities, and the onus is on all of us to be able to help promote and sponsor those people that we see that have a lot of potential. So when you see an open job position, even if it's not on your team and you're not responsible for hiring, who is it that you can suggest and promote, and whose names can you put in there that are potentially great candidates? When you see that there are people, whether women or other people from other diverse groups, who are actually have a lot of potential, who are maybe earlier in their career, what can you do to help offer to go out for a coffee or to support them and to provide some mentorship? What can we do to create those networks? Because as we create those networks and we know more people, when those opportunities come up, there's more people we know that we can mention and suggest if we are not the right person that might be suited for that role. And I do this all the time. And this is what my job is now in board work, is to be able to say, hey, there might not be other people out there that are known, but it's certainly not a supply issue. There's plenty of highly talented women, and we just have to get our names out there and be able to sponsor and promote them. So that's really the first piece.
I love it. And it's one of my favorite sayings the past few years is, you have to believe that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity isn't. So being vocal, active progenitors of opportunity is absolutely a huge, huge, huge thing. So Kelly Breslin Wright, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with us all of your incredible experience and so much great advice. We really appreciate it, and best of luck. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in and watching again. Stay tuned. There's going to be more of these coming up all month long.